Hello everyone and welcome back to Beatley Tone's Beatles channel. Thanks for joining me for this video. Lovely to have you here and I hope you're all doing well. Now, in today's video I'm going to be looking at and discussing Paul McCartney's 12-inch singles, the ones that he released between 1979 and 1990, and showing you from my collection. I've got this quite large, well, say quite large, it's not really that large, quite medium or even a little bit small pile of 12-inch singles that I bought at the time as they came out. So I'm hoping this will be quite interesting for people, because I don't think this is a topic that's been covered very extensively on YouTube to date, and it kind of gives you an idea of which 12-inch singles are sort of essential if you're trying to collect everything and which ones are pretty disposable. So my rationale for buying 12-inch singles was that if, or singles in general really, was if a single came out that wasn't on an album, I would buy it. If it came out with a track that was on an album but it had a B-side that wasn't on an album, then I would buy it. And with the 12-inch singles, the same thing. If it had an extended mix of one of Paul's songs, I would buy it. Or if it had, you know, bonus tracks on the B-side, even if the single was the same. And even some of the singles were just, you know, they weren't necessarily extended, but they were different mixes, and we'll go through that as we go through the singles. So those were the reasons why I bought 12-inch singles. It was just to kind of keep the sort of the completeness up to date, I suppose. One thing I will say about these 12-inch singles is that I've played most of them quite recently before doing this video, and they sound so good. They really do sound great. They're a little bit, you know, worse for wear as far as surface marks goes and stuff like that, but they play perfectly, and they just sound so warm and vinyl-y. And as ever, I want to hear your opinions down in the comments. Tell me whether you got on board with 12-inch singles or whether you totally ignored them, or if you bought them, which ones were your winners, which ones were your losers. I want to hear all about it. As you know, I always reply to everyone's comments if there's an answer to be given. So tell me all about it. You know where. I'm afraid this video has turned out much longer than I thought it was going to be, and I probably should have split it into two parts, but I'm going to leave it all as one bit. So get yourself into a comfy chair, get yourself a cup of tea or a beer, and sit back and let's have a little trip through the 1980s. Right, shall we get on with it? Yeah, let's. So the first single to get the 12-inch treatment was this one. Came out in March 1979, Good Night Tonight, and it was back with Daytime, Nighttime Suffering. The front cover there shows Wings Mark V for the first time, with Steve Holley and Lawrence Juba joining the band. For some reason, they're all dressed up in dinner suits with their hair styled like 1920s crooners. I'm not sure why, but it was kind of taken from the video. The back of the record looks like that. And unusually, inside, there was an inner sleeve, which you didn't get with 12-inch singles generally, but this one is very nice. Now we'll have a look at the vinyl. So the extended version of Good Night Tonight came in at about 7 minutes 15 seconds. It had sort of extra flamenco guitar. It had some extra guitar licks from Lawrence Juba, and that compares with the single version, which clocked in at about 4.5 minutes ish. It also had lots of other disco-y things on it. Now the B-side, Daytime Nighttime Suffering, which is just one of the greatest non-album B-sides that Wings ever did, it was the same on the 12-inch single as it was on the 7-inch single. So that's Good Night Tonight, back with Daytime Nighttime Suffering. It was quite appropriate for Good Night Tonight to get the 12-inch treatment because, you know, it was a disco song, so it lent itself well to that sort of format. It was recorded during the Back to the Egg sessions, but Back to the Egg turned out to be more of a rock album, and this didn't fit because of its disco-ness. So it was left off and put out as a standalone single, which is always good news. So none of the singles from Back to the Egg were given the 12-inch treatment. So when McCartney 2 came out in 1980, the first two singles released from that were Coming Up and Waterfalls. Neither of them got a 12-inch release either. But the third single released from McCartney 2 was Temporary Secretary, and that only came out on 12-inch. There was no 7-inch release of this. Now, the interesting thing about this one is that there were only 25,000 copies pressed, and the record was deleted on the day of release. It came out in September 1980, and because there were only 25,000 copies printed, it didn't make the charts. So let's have a look at the vinyl. The track Temporary Secretary, that was exactly the same as the version on McCartney 2, but the B-side is an interesting one. Secret Friend clocks in at 10.5 minutes. It's a sort of a doodle, a messing about in the studio, a bit of electronica, a bit of keyboardery. Is that a word? Yeah, I think so. Let's have it as a word. Keyboardery. Lots of keyboardery on that song, and probably goes on about 7 minutes, but too long. But it's good to have. Eventually, it got a CD release on the McCartney 2 archive collection. So that's your Temporary Secretary / Secret Friend 12-inch single. So moving on to the singles that came out from the Tug of War album. First up was, of course, Ebony and Ivory with Stevie Wonder. Came out in March 1982. Got to #1 in the UK. Got to #1 in the US. The back of the sleeve looks like that, with the handwritten lyrics to the song, where we can see the hard evidence of Paul rhyming the words keyboard with oh Lord and getting away with it. Now, fun fact about this record is that the BBC Radio 6 listeners voted Ebony and Ivory as the worst duet of all time, which was slightly harsh, I feel. They obviously hadn't heard You're the One That I Want by Hilda Baker and Arthur Mullard. So let's have a look at the vinyl. And the version on the 12-inch is exactly the same as the version on the Tug of War album. Now, the B-side was that had two tracks. The first one was Rain Clouds, a song written by Paul McCartney and Denny Laine. Paul plays pretty much everything on the song apart from the pipes, and backing vocals are by Denny, Linda and Eric Stewart from 10cc. Now, the interesting thing about this song was, if you remember on the day that John died, Paul was interviewed coming out of the studio, and he did the famous quote, you know, it's a bit of a drag in it, and they asked him what he'd been doing, and he said he'd been working on some stuff. Well, Rain Clouds was one of those songs that he'd been working on that day, on the 9th of December, when he was being interviewed. The other song on this single is Ebony and Ivory, where the music is exactly the same as the released album version, but Stevie Wonder's vocals not on it, so it's just Paul solo all the way through, and that's Ebony and Ivory. The next single to be released from Tug of War was Take It Away, and that did have a 12-inch single, but I didn't get it. It had on it Take It Away, obviously from the Tug of War album. It was backed with I'll Give You a Ring and Dress Me Up as a Robber. Because Dress Me Up as a Robber was already on the Tug of War album, I didn't need to buy it. I just needed to get the 7-inch single just to get I'll Give You a Ring. So October 1983 saw the first release from the Pipes of Peace album, which was Say Say Say, Paul McCartney and Michael Jackson. The back of the single looks like that, with Paul and Jackson at the control desk. Now the album version clocks in at about 4 minutes, and that's what came out as the 7-inch single. The 12-inch single had an extended remix at 5 minutes 40, and the remix was done by a guy called John Jellybean Benitez. He was called that because he was made entirely of jelly. The B-sides was first track was a 7-minute instrumental of Say Say Say, which it's an instrumental, and 7 minutes is way too long. Is way too long. The other track on it was Ode to Koala Bear, which was recorded in 1980. Features backing vocals from Linda and Eric Stewart again. Paul plays pretty much everything else on it, apart from drums, which is played by a guy called Paul Robinson. It's not a great track. It's an okay track. It's what I would call a typical B-side track. It's a deserved to be on the B-side. The A-side, the extended version of Say Say Say, I like a lot. I think it benefits from the longer version. I don't think it wastes too much time, and it's great. In 2015, there was another remix of Say Say Say, where for Record Store Day, they put out a version with the vocal parts reversed. So Paul's part was sung by Michael Jackson, Michael Jackson's part was sung by Paul. To be honest, the original version, miles better. They got it right first time. So that was Say Say Say, got to #1 in the US, #2 in the UK charts. So September 1984 saw the release of No More Lonely Nights. Now the ballad version of this is probably Paul's greatest single from the 1980s, in my opinion. Absolutely fantastic song. That's the front cover. The back of the sleeve looks like that. It's got a still from the movie, the scene where they do silly love songs. Now the ballad is absolutely fantastic, but on this 12-inch single, that isn't the main track. The A-side is the play-out version or dance mix, and this clocks in at 8 minutes 10. It is the longest version of this song. It's longer than the play-out version on the Broad Street album, and at this time it's still only available on this single. It hasn't come out yet on CD. That's probably one for the Broad Street Archive Collection version, I should imagine. Now on the B-side, we had a remake of Silly Love Songs, which is absolutely dreadful, terrible, horrible stuff. So the second track on the 12-inch single is the No More Lonely Nights ballad, but it's not the same version that's on the LP. This is what I call it the clean version, because it doesn't have the bass intro and the rain sort of coming down. It just goes straight into the vocal. It clocks in at about 4 minutes 38, which is the same as the 7-inch single. However, the CD version of the album, which does have the bass riff and the rain coming down and a longer fade out, that runs at 5 minutes 13. But yet, on the LP version of Give My Regards to Broad Street, which also has the bass riff and the rain coming down, it's a shorter version at 4 minutes 42. It's really confusing, isn't it? And honestly, it gets worse. By the time you get to Flowers in Dirt singles, you don't know where you are. But anyway, that is the No More Lonely Nights. It got to #2 in the UK and #6 in the US. So if you saw my recent video of record shop finds, you'll see that I picked up a picture disc of Spies Like Us. Well, this was the original black vinyl version that I bought in 1985. The back of the cover looks like that, which is basically stills from the video of the song. The track listing on this is exactly the same as on the picture disc. There's 4 tracks. So there's the Spies Like Us party mix, which clocks in at 7 minutes 10, produced by Phil Ramone, which is an unusual name to see as at the helm of a Paul McCartney record. There was also the Spies Like Us alternative mix, known to his friends as Tom. That's what it's called. That's a 3-minute 56 mix. On the B-side, there's Spies Like Us DJ version, clocks in at 3 minutes 46. This is the closest to the 7-inch single, which was actually longer, 4 minutes 48. The final track on this single was My Carnival Party Mix. Now, this isn't the same version as the My Carnival that appears on the Venus and Mars archive collection. This is a different version, different mix, mixed by a guy called Gary Langan. It's 6 minutes. The Venus and Mars version is about 4.5 minutes, something like that. And today, this is only available on this single. So it's only available on this single. No CD version of that version of My Carnival as yet. The record, it got to number 13 in the UK and number 7 in the US. So my opinion of Spies Like Us, I think the single is great. It's a good song. It's nice. It's a nice, fun song. I like it a lot. The alternative mixes of Spies Like Us, to be honest, if you only ever hear them once and never hear them again, that would be absolutely fine. My Carnival is probably a little bit too long for its own good, but it's quite a fun song and it's nice to have. And so that's Spies Like Us. So July 1986 saw the release of Press, the first single from the album Press to Play. I don't share the same opinion as most fans about Press to Play. I think Press to Play gets bad press. You see what I did there? I do. I think there's some good stuff on Press to Play, and this was the first single. It's got 4 tracks on it. That's the back of it. Paul looking over onto the mixing desk. Nice picture of that. So on the record, we've got, as I say, we've got 4 tracks. We've got the normal album version of Press as on the A side, backed up with the track It's Not True, which is a remix running at 5 minutes 50. The 7-inch version carried a version of 4 minutes 31, but the 12-inch version was the one that was included on the Press to Play CD. Now, the Press to Play CD contained 3 extra tracks that weren't on the album. This is not a re-release. The actual original release of Press to Play, the CD, had 3 extra tracks. Now, Press to Play was actually the last album that I bought exclusively on vinyl. I got my first CD player in 1987, so this was the last one that I bought. So when I first bought the Press to Play album, I was missing 3 tracks because I didn't have a CD player. But yeah, so It's Not True was on the CD version of Press to Play, but not on the album version, and it's a good song, I think. And the 5 minute 50 version is good. Doesn't really waste any time. It's cool. On the B side, there was a track called Hang Glide, which was a song written by Paul and Eric Stewart. It was recorded during the Press to Play sessions, but unused on the album, and it remains unreleased on CD to date, so you can only get it on this single. The final track was the Press dub mix, which is mostly instrumental. Clocks in 6 minutes 30, remixed by Burt Bevans and Steve Forward, and to be honest, they shouldn't have bothered, really. They really shouldn't have bothered. That also remains unreleased on CD. The single Press got to number 25 in the UK and 21 in the US, so relatively a bit of a flop. So the second single to be lifted from the Press to Play album, bizarrely, was Pretty Little Head. Now, don't get me wrong, I love the song Pretty Little Head on the album. I think it's great, but I would have never have called it single material. But this version has been remixed by a guy called John Pottinger, and he has done a fantastic job with this and makes it much more accessible as a as a single. It's an extended version. It clocks in at 6 minutes 56, so it's almost 7 minutes. The album version is about 5 minutes and 14 seconds, but it is really great. I think it's a fantastic remix. On the B-side was another remix. This was the track Angry from Press to Play. It's not the same version as on the album, but it is the same length, so it hasn't been extended, it's just been remixed. The guy that did the remix called Larry Alexander. Now the third track on the 12-inch single was the track Right Away, which is a good song. This was another one of those extra tracks that were on the CD version of Press to Play, but not on the LP version. It's a pretty good song, and the version on the 12-inch is the same as that was on the Press to Play CD. Unsurprisingly, Pretty Little Head in the charts did absolutely nothing. It didn't make the charts at all. So, would you believe it, in December 1986 there was a third single release from Press to Play, and that was Only Love Remains, probably the most commercial song on the whole album. And why this wasn't the lead-off single, I just don't know. Here's the back of that single. Now, the version that came out as a single was a remix of the track that was on the album. It was the same length, but it had been remixed by a guy called Jim Much, and the remix was even more commercial sounding than the album track. Despite that, it didn't do very well. It got to number 34 in the UK and number 9 in the US. Now, on the B-side, we got the third of the 3 tracks that were exclusive to the CD release of Press to Play that weren't on the LP version, Tough on a Tightrope. Again, pretty good song, nothing spectacular, but decent enough song. Now, this was an extended version of that, because this one came in at 7 minutes and 3 seconds and was remixed by Julian Mendelssohn. The album version is only about 4 minutes 42. So now, so for people that didn't have CDs at the time, like myself, we now had all 3 of the bonus tracks that were on the CD that were left off the album on the 3 12-inch singles that came from the album. So we did get those tracks eventually. The third track on the Only Love Remains 12-inch single was a remix of Talk More Talk. Again, this was extended from 5 minutes 15 to 5 minutes 56, so not that much of an extension, but it was a little bit longer. And I think that this remix also benefits from the remix treatment which was done by Paul and John Jacobs. It makes the song more accessible, less sort of 80s production. So that is Only Love Remains. Now, in 1987, there was no new Paul McCartney album of original material, but he did go into the studio with some pals and record a whole bunch of rock and roll covers, and this was put out as an album called Chopper B CCCP, or otherwise known as the Russian album, but it only got a release in Russia. So we didn't get any of these tracks. We did get them later. I think the early 90s they came out, but some of them got drip-fed to us via CD singles and 12-inch singles. Now, also in 1987, Paul put out a compilation album, a double album called All the Best, and to promote that album, he put one song that was new on it, and that was a song called Once Upon a Long Ago. Now, this song was due to be a duet with Freddie Mercury, but due to Freddie's commitments with Queen, he wasn't able to find a date to record it, so Paul ended up doing it solo. And Once Upon a Long Ago came out in quite a few formats, so there were 2 12-inch singles, a CD single and a 7-inch single. Now, this is the 12-inch single that I've got, and that's Once Upon a Long Ago extended version. Now, this is the longest version of that song, clocks in at about just over 6 minutes. The other 12-inch single had another version of Once Upon a Long Ago, which was known as Once Upon a Long Ago long version, but it wasn't that long at all. It was only 4 minutes 34. Now, this single on the B side, well, not on the B side, actually it had 4 tracks, so 2 on the A, 2 on the B, had on the A side also Back on My Feet, which was the first song to be released from the project that Paul had writing songs with Elvis Costello, most of which ended up on Flowers in the Dirt and Off the Ground. Now on this single we got 2 tracks from the Russian album, Lordy Miss Claudy and Kansas City. The other 12-inch single, the one with Once Upon a Long Ago long version, which isn't that much of a long version, had Midnight Special and Don't Get Around Much Anymore. So if you wanted all of those, you needed both the singles. The CD single had on it Don't Get Around Much Anymore and Kansas City as the 2 tracks from the Russian album. Now, Once Upon a Long Ago did quite well. It got to number 10 in the UK, but it didn't get a single release at all in the US, so they just got it via the All the Best album. So I know the title of this video is Paul McCartney's singles from the 80s, but I did start this video with Good Night Tonight, which was from 1979. So I'm just going to end the video with a couple of 12-inch singles that I bought in 1990, and it nicely bookends it, and that was more or less the end of my buying of 12-inch singles. So in February 1990, Paul put out a 3rd single from Flowers in the Dirt. Now, by the time Flowers in the Dirt had come out, I'd already sort of stopped buying singles on vinyl and I was buying them on CD. So My Brave Face and this one, I bought the CD singles, and I also bought the CD single for Put It There, but I bought the 12-inch single because it came with this art print drawn by Paul. So that was the reason for buying it. Back of the 12-inch looks like that, and the main single, Put It There, was just the Flowers in the Dirt version, but there were 2 interesting B-sides on this. The first one, Mama's Little Girl, which is a lovely sort of folky ballad recorded in 1972 with Wings Mark II with Dennis Sewell and Henry McCulloch, and even featured backing vocals from Heather McCartney. That's the little Heather McCartney, not the big, horrible Heather McCartney. Now, this track has appeared on CD previously. Bizarrely, in 1993, when the Paul McCartney collection came out as a remastered CD, it was included on the Wildlife album as a bonus track. Totally wrong, because Mama's Little Girl, like I say, was Wings Mark II and Wildlife was Wings Mark I, so Henry McCulloch wasn't in the band then, so it was wrong. It did get a proper release on CD in the Red Rose Speedway archive collection, which is the correct place for it. The second track that was on it was a track called Sometime Next Year, which was recorded by Wings Mark V in 1978 with Steve Holley and Lawrence Juba. Now, this song was to be included in the soundtrack of the film by the same name, but it was dropped from the soundtrack because it was felt that the lyrics of the song gave away too much of the plot. And this track remains unreleased on CD at the moment, and it's very nice. Put It There as a single didn't do very well. It got to number 32 in the UK and number 13 in the US. So the final 12-inch single in this collection is All My Trials, which came out in November 1990. That's the back of it. Lovely shot there of Paul on the piano and Hamish Stewart there from the live tour that he did in 1989 and into 1990. I went to one of the shows at Wembley and it was fantastic. Now that tour spawned an album called Tripping the Live Fantastic, which was Paul's first live album as a solo artist, the first one since Wings Over America. These days you can't move for Paul live albums, and that tour was the first tour where he started doing wholesale amount of Beatles songs in his set. So it was a really big thing at that time. These days we wish he would go back to doing loads of stuff from his solo career rather than doing the same Beatles songs every time he goes out on tour. But anyway, that's by the by. Anyway, all My Trials was recorded on this tour at a show in Milan, and it didn't appear on the Tripping the Live Fantastic double CD, the full gig, but it did appear on what was later released as a highlights CD, condensed down to one CD. So that was a bit weird, but I didn't bother buying the Tripping the Live Fantastic highlights album because I had the whole, the double CD, which had everything on it, but it didn't have this All My Trials on it, so I had to buy the CD single and the 12-inch single. So also on the 12-inch single, and was also on the CD single, was a recording of Sea Moon from one of the soundtracks that's actually also recorded in Milan. Now the big pulling point for the 12-inch single, which wasn't on the CD single, was that there was a version of Mull of Kintyre recorded live in Glasgow on that tour. Now Paul did Mull of Kintyre extensively on his 1979 UK tour, did it at every gig, but he hasn't done it that often since. So this is quite a rare recording of Paul doing Mull of Kintyre. I believe it's the only released live version of Mull of Kintyre. So that was the big pull for this, and it's great. And the other track on the 12-inch single is Put It There, and that is from the regular Tripping the Live Fantastic album, so that wasn't anything new. The CD single had obviously All My Trials, it also had Sea Moon, but the pulling power for that was that Paul did a medley of John songs from the gig in Liverpool on that tour, where he did a medley of Strawberry Fields, Help and Give Peace a Chance. So that was the pulling power of that CD. So as usual, I want to hear your comments down below about the 12-inch singles that you've got maybe, or what you think of the extra tracks that are on the ones that you've got, or whether you didn't bother with 12-inch singles at all and they just completely passed you by. Whatever you want to tell me, stick it down in the comments. As you know, I always answer all the comments. Now, if you've liked the video, please give it a like. These videos take a long time to make, and I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe to the channel if you haven't already by clicking the button over there. It only takes a second. That would be absolutely fantastic, and you'd be supporting the channel. Now, the next video that I'm going to do is we're going to do a look at all the various Beatles compilation albums that have come out over the years, and we'll be ranking them best to worst. So that's something to look forward to coming next week. Thanks very much for watching the video. Thanks for being part of my channel. I really appreciate everyone who has subscribed. It's great having you here, and I'd see comments from the same people from every video, and that's really lovely to see. So thank you very much for that, and I will see you on the next video. Thanks very much for watching.